Candy, please collect the roll.
Mrs. Milius,
Here.
Mr. Ewing,
Present.
Mrs. Sealing. Here. Mr. Hoffman,
Present.
Mr. Updike,
Present.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Here.
Mr. Anderson.
Present.
Everyone's here.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I appreciate folks coming in. First item on our agenda is approval of the agenda.
So move.
Seconded. It's moved and seconded for approval of the agenda. Any discussions or comment? Candy, please collect the roll.
We'll start the vote with Mr. Ewing,
Yes.
Mrs. Sealing.
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman,
Yes.
Mr. Updike,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Milius,
Yes.
approved.
Very good. Moving on to our third item on our agenda this evening is election of board officers. With the first item of election of the board president. Candy, can you walk us through the process?
We'll start with nominations. If there's only one nomination, and this one, we're only working on the board president, we'll take a vote orally like we normally do. If there are two nominations, we will take a vote by the little note cards that I put by your computer, actually. Rachel did. And then we actually have to read those and we'll tabulate those. And if we don't get a quorum of 4 votes for one person, then we have to take them again. So at this point, we would call for nominations.
I would like to nominate Doug Updike for board president. I think you've done a great job keeping us in order here.
Well, thank you.
Mr. Updike, do you accept that?
I would accept that, yes.
Okay. Are there any additional nominations? Failure for additional nominations, we will take the vote on this orally. We'll start the vote with Mrs. Sealing.
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman.
Yes.
Mr. Updike.
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell.
Yes.
Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
Mrs. Milius.
Yes.
Mr. Ewing.
Yes.
Congratulations, Mr. Updike. You are president.
Very good, thank you. Moving on to election of a board vice president, and I would like to start the nominations to nominate Sharon Mitchell as vice president.
Maybe we should.
Mrs. Mitchell, do you accept that nomination?
I will accept that nomination.
Are there any additional nominations? We will go ahead and take a voice vote on that, starting with Mr. Hoffman,
Yes.
Mr. Updike,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Milius,
Yes.
Mr. Ewing,
Yes.
Mrs. Sealing.
Yes.
Approved. Congratulations. Mrs. Mitchell, you are vice president.
Very good. Well done, Sharon. Moving on to our next agenda item, please rise and join me in the pledge of allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, thank you. Moving on to good news recognitions and announcements. Dr. Luttrell.
Yes, have a little bit of a lengthy good news recognitions and announcements this time. Start out with simply this was the third day of classes for second semester. Total of 91 student attendance days in second semester. So we've now at 88 remaining. And as of today, the final attendance day for students is set for Thursday, May the 25th, 2023. Some of you may have been wondering why our very photogenic Board of Education was having their photo taken prior to the meeting. And I wanted to say that this January is coming up is the formal National Board of Public School Education Board of Education Appreciation Month, week, however you want to celebrate it for, and this is for individuals that serve selflessly for the betterment of their local school districts at no pay. The members of each school district's Board of Education give many hours every year, making sure that our students and our staff, have the most up-to-date and viable resources needed for our students to be successful. And so at this time, I just simply, while they remain seated, I am going to go around and hand each of them just a certificate of appreciation and telling them a big thank you for their service that they give to the students and staff and patrons of the district each and every day. Director Anderson, thank you.
Thank you.
Director Mitchell, Vice President Mitchell, appreciate everything you do. President Updike, congratulations on being another term. Did that come with a pay raise?
I think it did.
Director Hoffman,
Thank you, sir.
thank you for your service. Director Seelig, thank you.
Thank you.
Director Ewing, thank you very much for your service. And Director Milius, thank you. Again, very, very thankless job, takes a lot of commitment, and another example of service and giving back to others. Next recognition we want to do is, we started this school year presenting periodically recipients and designating them with the USD230 Core Values Award. And this is a designation that anyone can nominate an individual for us and tell why a group or an individual might represent or embody any one or multiple of those 6 core values. And this evening we have Woodland Spring Middle School Principal, Mr. Rod Sprague, who is going to have shared with us some information about 2 separate recipients for those awards and what make them embody such recognition. Mr. Sprague.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. The first thing I want to say is that when we first opened up Woodland Spring, we had 3 words that kept coming up as we were working on our strategic planning process and preparing to open the school year.
I think it is now. Good. Anyway, the 3 words that kept coming up as we were working in 2019 were inspire, engage, and connect. And then as we began our work toward our 2028 strategic planning process, that served as our springboard for our mission statement, which is to engage all members of the WSMS community in a culture of partnership, learning, and leadership so that every student can achieve academic and personal success. The recognitions that I had tonight are for teachers who have lived this mission for the past 2 years and have modeled what it means to inspire, to engage, and to connect with our students, our community, and with each other. The first core value recognition that I'd like to do is for student success. And at this time, I'd like for Brendan Clary to come on up. And as he's coming up, I'll talk a little bit about him. And I know he gets kind of nervous when I do that, but Brendan worked with our ambassador program this year, and he had an 8th grade student that he worked with. The goal of the ambassador program is to connect kids with teachers that kind of work in a field that they're interested in. And he had a student that's very interested in computer science. And so she asked to work with him, and the goal for him then is to mentor that student and work with that student throughout the semester, kind of expose them to different areas of that career field, and kind of mentor along the process. At one point in time, the student came to him and said, "Hey, Mr. Clary, I would love to teach one day a class." And so he gave her that opportunity, and then he came in a little bit nervous because I think she did a better job than I do. With that. So, he participated in our ambassador program, but then the other thing he did is he recognized one of our goals was to get students engaged in school life outside of athletics and do things more than just athletics. And he came to me last year with the idea of starting a Science Olympiad team. And this year he took off, and he doesn't get paid anything extra to do this. And if you've ever seen a Science Olympiad program, it's a lot, but he wanted to do this for our kids. He has 27 kids on his team. He actually has 2 teams, correct?
Yep.
And if I'm not mistaken, at their first competition, they finished 8th out of all the schools that were there. And they are going to another competition this Saturday. And hopefully, if they do well enough, they're going to qualify for regionals and hopefully eventually state and all of that. So just the fact that he's willing to invest his time in our students and give them opportunities to explore the area of STEM, I want to recognize him with a student success recognition. Thank you, Mr. Clary. So the second core value recognition I'd like to do isn't for just one individual, it's for an entire team of people. When we looked at our strategic plan, we knew that it was ambitious. Everything that we wanted to do in the area of academic excellence and personal development, we knew was going to take a lot of work, and we were going to have to do things differently. So as a school and as a leadership team, we decided to operate our school just slightly a little bit different. We formed teams, and everybody on here is a leader of a team and is part of our leadership team as a school. And so I'd like for the following people to come up: Paul Carter, Amy Wells, Alicia Von Stein, Sarah Collins, Jolene Rutledge, Jessica Gazzano, Autumn Beshore, Ben Gearing, Megan Sandberg, Allison Vore, Billy Pinkham, Polly Dvorak, Richard Roberts, and Michelle Harris, which not everybody's here tonight. They couldn't be here, but we do have a very good select group from this group. I want to tell you a little bit about what they've accomplished. If we look at our goals, everything that we wanted to do, student engagement, the things we wanted to do with academic excellence, we knew that it was going to take a lot. And so these people work with every member of our staff. And what they did is we wanted to get every member of our WSMS staff engaged in the process. We didn't want it to sit with just a few people, making things happen. So every member of our staff serves on a team with these individuals. And what they do with them is they lead the process. They're facilitators. They're not the experts. And we talked about the fact that none of us are experts in everything. We can't be. They're not the experts, but these people have an interest in this, in leadership, and they have an interest in the areas that they work in. And we work in everything from professional learning to academic excellence to student personal development and parent engagement, staff engagement, student engagement, all of the areas that are out there. Did I miss any? Did I get them all? Wow, that was impressive. I didn't even read my notes. So I want to tell you a little bit of the things that they've accomplished in a very short period of time. So far this year, they've developed a process and implemented student-led clubs. Not teacher-led clubs, student-led clubs, where students have to put a proposal together, get membership together, find a sponsor for their club, pitch the idea to me, and then they run their clubs and the students lead them. They created a positive student culture through student activities, all kinds of activities throughout the year. I know that Phil's not very happy with me about the door decorating contest because it kept setting the alarms off, or Kylie really on that one. Kylie's here somewhere and he's laughing back there. They got everyone involved in our strategic planning process. Everyone, all of our paras, all of our staff, and that's exciting. They're in the process. They've actually developed a student data binder that we're going to roll out with 6th grade this year, and we're just going to keep rolling it up a grade level every year, adding until we have that. The idea is John Hattie's visible learning strategy, and they get kids involved in monitoring their progress, looking what they need to grow in, setting goals for themselves, all of that. We have a student data binder that we created as a digital binder. We're rolling that out with 6th grade this year. And then we'll bring in the new sixth graders next year and the following sixth graders next year till we have the whole school. Starting off, maybe what some people say a little small, but this is an ambitious project to do that much and change the culture of how students look at learning and their progress and taking ownership in their learning is a really big deal. They created an assessment schedule that best meets the student needs and reduces the loss of learning. When you do assessments, one thing is you have to give up learning time to do that. And they developed an assessment schedule using our PLC schedule to accomplish that. Our professional learning team is currently creating grade level writing rubrics to help with writing. And then another thing that our professional learning team did this year is they wanted to work with all teachers, not just ELA teachers, but science teachers, math teachers, history teachers, art teachers, everyone in our building using reading strategies and writing strategies that are proven to be successful. And we're using a book called The Core Six. And then they've developed a process called some pineapple chart. They didn't develop the pineapple chart concept, but they are using pineapple charts to get teachers to go observe each other using those strategies. And so that's been a focus of our professional learning this year. A lot of this, if it just relied on Mr. Carter and myself, none of this would have happened. I'll be really honest with you. It's impossible for two people to pull all this off and do everything that we need to do for schools in a middle school setting. But because of the work of this group, they did that. They really truly embody the core value of an engaged community. So I want to thank them. I'm very proud of them and they've done a tremendous job. So thank you. Mr. Carter. And then, I also have a certificate for you.
You were elected president. That's like part of the duties.
Smile for all the pictures. They're not full this time yet.
All right.
How are you?
Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. Very good. Thank you.
Hey, Mr. Sprague, we thank you for the Core Values Award, and then we're going to sum up or finish up the good news, recognitions, and announcements with our monthly highlight video and how appropriate that this month's highlight video showing what's going on, what's going well, is from Woodland Spring Middle School.
What's going well is we have all of our sports that are going on. Theater starting next week. Basketball's going on right now. We have a lot of kids that are involved in a lot of different areas in sports and other things that are non-athletic as well.
With our sixth graders, I'm really looking forward to one of our culminating projects where they design an inclusive playground. They really get to practice spatial reasoning, CAD skills, and looking how to benefit their community, to design with others in mind and really develop empathy.
Some things that are going well here at the middle school that we have just implemented is the kids have been able to come up with some clubs that they wanted to participate in. We are really getting into that after school starting this semester. So I think they're pretty excited and the teachers are too.
Well, I've been pleasantly surprised with the athletes' attitudes. Everyone's been pretty much upbeat and really dialed in throughout tryouts and throughout the first couple of days. I've been very, very impressed.
The play is called How the Other Half Dies, and this lady goes and buys a car, and there ends up being a dead body in the truck. It's just chaos trying to figure out what to do with the body and still getting ready for a dinner party. My group of 8th graders, I am really excited to see them grow this year. They did a really great job in our play last year, and I'm really excited to see how they take this show and run with it.
Okay, thank you. And that's this month's good news announcements and recognitions.
Very good. Thank you, Dr. Luttrell. A lot of good information there, a lot of good things happening. We'll move on to business within individuals. Candy?
There were no cards.
All right, thank you. Moving on to the consent agenda, which consists of approval of the consent agenda, approval of the minutes from the 12/12/22 meeting, approval of the minutes of the special meeting on 1/5/23, personnel and early graduation requests.
I have a question, just in terms of policy on the personnel. I see we have a teacher that resigned December 20th for 5th grade. How do we handle that? Do we hire a new teacher? Do we move someone else in from somewhere else? How's that work?
Typically, what's employed there is you find a teacher that is going to agree to be like the kind of the teacher for the rest of the year, but it's not really a fully on board as a staff member, kind of as a sub or whatever. Director Hackney, if you want to address any of that, because again, I'm still kind of on it, but I would think it's just kind of filling that for the end till the end of the year.
It depends on the position. If we could get someone hired, with it being a late resignation, we chose to go with an excellent long-term sub, and that will give us some time to appropriately post an interview and fill it for next year.
Good thing it doesn't happen very often.
Yes,
Yeah.
agree.
Okay, thanks.
I just wanted to make a comment. We'll really hate to see Jody Cole retiring, but also very happy for her to be able to enjoy her older kids and kind of move on with the next phase of life. So she will be greatly missed.
Yes.
That was exactly what I was going to say too. I wanted to call out, I mean, from a personal standpoint, Dylan will finish elementary school and has gone all the way through with her. So I've had a lot of personal interaction, and she is a difference maker. And so not just, I had other kids there too, but he went all the way through with her. But I just want to say, if she's listening or hears this later, how much I appreciate her time and dedication. Her accomplishments are outstanding. I mean, she has really, really taken that school to a new height. So thank you, Mrs. Cole.
I would agree. I had my kids went through Prairie Creek, and she is really wonderful, and her tenure with us has been long. As we've seen, it's been really hard to keep administration in some of those buildings lately. So she went through some hard times with that school when it was full, and she did it with a smile every single day. And it was almost like the kids just might have noticed more if she wasn't just always so friendly and positive and encouraging. So I am sad to see her go.
I had another question on just from the personnel agenda. When we have coaches that resign or people that we need to fill those kinds of positions, I know in the past it has been the goal that it would be a teacher. Is that still our goal? Are we looking at other opportunities? I'm just curious what the update on that is.
No, that's a great question. And the goal is, I think in any school district, is always to have any position that is extra duty in nature, specifically coaching, filled by individuals that are part of the staff. However, over the years, as just across the board, not that it's a bad thing, but as our extracurricular program, especially when it comes to coaches, and that has expanded as we've expanded schools, it does become more difficult sometimes, even though you post it internally as well to fill every single one. I do know that I know USD230 does really strive to limit that, but it's not always just completely able to do that. I know that Director Hackney and I and Dr. Robinson have talked, as we bring on Forest Spring Middle School next year, that's a question as well, because, again, but we strive to fill it internally, but it's not always possible. Director Hackney, again, I'll let you.
Yeah, and on our application, we have a section regarding desires to sponsor or coach sports. We provide that list to our ADs of all of our new hires, what they are interested in. So they make very direct calls to those folks saying, I see you're interested in coaching wrestling. I have an opening. So we do really everything we can, not only with the advertising, but making direct calls to our current employees to get them. We're just seeing a lot of changes in just families, people wanting to spend more time with families, a lot of new babies, younger children and stuff. I think that that's probably one of the reasons we do. As if we had two excellent candidates for a job and one is willing to coach or sponsor and one isn't, we're generally going to choose that person that's willing to coach and sponsor. So a lot of pieces. There is a bit of a changing dynamics. I think people that coach and sponsor love doing that, but people are looking for a little bit different work-life balance, I think might be one of the biggest contributors to that.
Yeah, I mean, we've had really outstanding coaches over the years, so I know how much time they really do. They're passionate about it, and we want people that are
absolutely. And oftentimes, if they show any interest at all in loving that coaching job, and then, hey, talk to me about a job, we've actually gotten a couple into, as employees, kind of in a backward way, but it has worked out really well.
So it is a possibility if we needed to, that we could, Rule 10, is that
Rule 10.
Okay. But obviously there's a process. If they're not a part of the district, they still go through all of the screenings.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. All the trainings, all the screenings. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Given personnel.
Any other questions or comments, discussion on the consent agenda?
Mr. President, I move for approval of the consent agenda.
Second the motion.
It's moved and seconded for approval of the consent agenda. Any additional discussion or comments? Candy, please collect the vote.
We'll start with the vote with Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Milius.
Yes.
Mr. Ewing,
Yes.
Mrs. Sealing,
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman,
Yes.
Mr. Updike,
Yes.
approved.
Okay, moving on to action items is the purchase of Windows desktop computers for staff and students. Dr. Luttrell.
Yes, this was presented last month, December meeting. Mr. Elliott is unable to be in live attendance, but is available by Zoom, hanging on if there's any questions. But again, to reiterate, these are for the teacher. Most of them are for teacher desktop computers that are at the teacher's desk that we replace every so many years. This does not include Dayton Creek because Dayton Creeks are still fall under the scope of being within our normal rotation. There are some, of course, for Forest Spring. And then also we do still have areas within our buildings that still have desktops for computer labs. Not all, we slowly moving, but we do have some of those. So that's what this particular purchase covers.
Any questions for Mr. Elliott?
And I'll get to my question, but thanks for putting in the application menu with the time and what's being used. The Arduino and the Fusion 360 and Excel. That's neat to see that the kids are using that stuff. That's pretty high tech stuff. In the price quote, where it says price 1 and price 2, what does that mean?
That was from the previous agenda item. If you'll notice on the current agenda item, it doesn't have those listed. That was just the attachments from before.
Okay.
This particular, that was just letting you know that I was working through the process with the vendor.
So the first price was the price they gave me the first time. And the second price was when I told them that wasn't good enough. So
Good, I like that.
Any other questions for Mr. Elliott? This is an action item.
Mr. President, I move we approve the purchase of Windows desktop computers for staff and students as presented. Second the motion.
It's moved and seconded to purchase for the purchase of Windows desktop computers for staff and students as presented. Any final questions or comments? Andy, please collect the vote.
We'll begin the vote with Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Milius,
Yes.
Mr. Ewing,
Yes.
Mrs. Sealing,
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman,
Yes.
Mr. Updike,
Yes,
Mrs. Mitchell.
Yes.
Approved.
very good. Thank you. Moving on to action item 8.02, which is the elementary English language arts and structural materials adoption.
Yeah, and
Dr. Liddell?
last month, we also, Dr. Smith presented, report on the, recommendation to purchase instructional resource materials for our K-5 language arts reading curriculum. She went into detail in that. I know we've made available all the materials that go along with that. This is the purchase was, I think, to cover all of the materials and resources needed for this program across K-5 for, I think, about 7 years. And so we're asking again for formal action for this purchase as presented.
Any questions or discussion on the elementary English language arts and structural materials adoption?
I sat through a site council meeting today and they, this was one of the topics and they kind of gave a similar presentation to the one we saw before. But there is a couple additional things they spoke about and talked about how this was really heavy in science and history and how they really felt, and you could see it in, they also talked about their strategic plan and reading and all of that. And you could see how the program we're currently using maybe isn't just fitting the bill right now, and that everyone's really, really excited about this. I did have one question just as far as this goes along with kind of in line with Wonders. If we approve this and we go through, are we able to reviewing all of a whole year's curriculum for 6th grades is a lot, but are we able to have, since it is science and history heavy for elementary, Mrs. Bauer had given an example that maybe there's a couple things in Wonders currently that she just skips over, but that's not really, that's not at every school, you know, it's not consistent. Are we able to go through, redline some of those lessons and have that be consistent across the district?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's the work of our ELA curriculum team. So after we make a formal adoption of a new product, that ELA curriculum team will meet several times in the following semester. So in this case, they'll meet throughout the spring to start writing new curriculum maps. And it will guide teachers on how to use the resources, which lessons, which stories. So if there's anything that they don't feel like is a good fit for a classroom lesson, then they can omit that within the curriculum maps. And each year when our teachers begin the teaching for the next school year, when we go through new team member academy, they're given some professional learning on how to implement those curriculum maps and resources. So there is that opportunity for all schools.
For all schools, or we do it at a higher level and then tell the school so there's consistent?
So every school, so when I said the ELA curriculum team writes those unit maps, every school has a team representative. So the kindergarten ELA curriculum team is one kindergarten teacher from every school. So each school has input in the development of the curriculum, and then that goes out to all schools and is consistent across the schools.
Awesome, thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Mr. President, I move that the board purchase instructional resource materials from Amplify for kindergarten through fifth grade reading language arts curriculum as presented.
Second.
It's moved and seconded to purchase instructional resource materials from Amplify as presented. Any final questions or comments? Andy, please collect the vote.
We'll start the vote with Mrs. Milius,
Yes.
Mr. Ewing,
Yes.
Mrs. Sealing,
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman,
Yes.
Mr. Updike,
Yes,
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
approved.
very good. Thank you. Moving on to discussion items. First item is bond refinance. Dr. Luttrell.
Yes, this is again is a item that again, we're just looking at tonight, kind of discussion, making you aware. We would bring it back for a formal resolution for approval at the next meeting. But Greg Varenberg, who you all know well, he recently has been speaking with us a couple times on different issues. But again, he is our bonding agent, our financial advisor, and he's always watching the numbers, watching the rates to see if any of our current financings, could be refinanced at some point in time and save the district money over the course of the term of those bonds. And he recently found some possible avenues that might save the district some money. And of course, when he relays that to Doug Schwinn, Doug gets all excited, of course. And so we made time for Greg to come in this evening and kind of give us an update on what you found, what you're going to be working on, and what we hope the board will grant you permission to keep working on and bring back to us for formal adoption in a next meeting or so.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. Appreciate the chance to be here to discuss this opportunity with you. But as many of you on the board know, bond refinancings are opportunities that the district has taken advantage of at certain periods over the years. And you look back, it's interesting. You go all the way back to 2007. And since then, there have been 12 opportunities that the district's taken advantage of issuing refunding bonds at favorable interest rates to pay off some of the outstanding bonds. And the cumulative savings has become a pretty significant number. To date, if you go back to that 2007 refinancing, $10,204,976. And you think about that, those are dollars that stay in the community rather than interest that's paid out to those bond investors. And it's also interesting to note when you look at the range of savings from those refinancings, it has been as low as $202,000 to one of the series of refunding bonds that we completed was total savings of $2,576,000. And when you refinance a bond issue, it's a little bit different than if you're refinancing a home loan or some other loan, because you can go into all of the different series of bonds that have been issued over the years and then look at each individual year of repayment or maturity and look at the interest rate assigned to that year and determine, does refinancing just that 1 year or that portion of a bond make sense? Does it capture a savings for the district or not? And so when we're refinancing bonds, we're actually not going in and refinancing everything. We're just looking at very select portions of the outstanding bonds. And I can imagine one of the questions that you're asking yourself is, with interest rates going up this year or during the past year, how could there be an opportunity to capture a savings? And it really goes back to a change in the tax law in 2017. The Tax Cut and Jobs Act eliminated the ability for not only the Spring Hill School District, but other cities, counties, and school districts throughout the country to complete what's called a tax-exempt advance refunding bond. So it took away one of your refinancing tools, and it still gave you the ability to sell a taxable advance refunding bond issue where the interest income to a bond investor is subject to federal income tax. And so those investors are going to require a little bit higher interest rate because they know that the interest income is not exempt. Part of that they're going to have to pay in income tax back to the federal government. So we completed in 2020 and 2021 2 taxable advance refundings, and interest rates were so low at that point in time that it made sense to go ahead. And even though the interest was taxable, the rate was favorable, and we were able to lock in savings. You know, for example, the 2020 refinancing, we took an interest rate from 4.8% down to about 2.3%. And the 2021 refinancing, I believe, was taking interest rate of bonds we were refinancing from about 3.2% down to about 1.4%. So very significant drop. But this opportunity is a little different than your typical refinancing, where we would go out and sell a new series of bonds and then take the proceeds of that new bond issue and exercise what is called a call feature or a redemption feature, where we have the legal ability to pay off that bond at a certain date in time. This refinancing is actually, we would be selling a new series of bonds, and we now can, the tax laws would allow you to issue this new series of bonds at tax exempt interest rates. And so we would be able to take the proceeds of this new tax exempt refinancing and then go to those investors that own your taxable bonds and look at the current market value of those bonds. And as interest rates have gone up, the value or the price of those bonds has gone down. And if we can get those current bondholders to agree to sell their bonds to the district at market prices, then we're actually buying in bonds that have an average market value, if you will, of about 4.25%, and we'd be selling a new issue at an average rate of about 3.25%. So it's a little bit of a different approach. It's a little more complicated, but it's a lot more unpredictable. And the unpredictable part of that is we don't have the legal ability to force a bondholder to redeem their bonds to the district. We're really subject to their willingness to sell those bonds at a slight premium to where the current market values are at, and buy in those bonds and then pay those off with a new issue at a favorable interest rate. So we wanted to share this idea with you this evening, give you an opportunity to think about it. If it is something that you want to move forward with, as many of you may recall, the first step is what we call an authorizing resolution. And the authorizing resolution just gives us and Gilmore and Bell, your bond attorney, to start exploring this more fully. Once we have your permission to move ahead, we would then work with those current bond investors and see if they would be willing to sell the bonds in at favorable prices to where we could capture a savings for the district. So just to give you an idea of the estimated savings that we would be looking at on this opportunity, the 2021 bonds are what we have focused in on, and that issue has principal amount outstanding of about $30,565,000. There's really about 32% of that issue that's eligible for refinancing. So it's really a principal amount of about $9.7 million that we would view as a candidate for refinancing. And if we can lock in that differential of taking that market value rate of 4.25% and dropping that interest rate down to about 3.25%, then the savings to the district would be about $399,000. And that assumes that we would get investors for the full 9 million of bonds to agree to sell those to the district. If we could only get half of the bond investors, say only 4 to 5 million, then you're going to be looking at about half of that 399,000 or something close to about 200,000 in savings. So I think the first step obviously is to see if this is something you want us to explore. But then from our perspective, once we have your permission to move ahead, the first step is see how many bond investors would potentially sell those bonds. That will then allow us to more accurately describe to you what that level of savings would look like. And then if it still makes sense to push ahead at that point, we would go ahead and lock in that savings for the district. So again, if this works as we have calculated and we can convince all of those existing bondholders to sell their bonds, and the magnitude of the savings, maybe, close to about 400,000 in savings, and would be a nice addition to that cumulative savings that the district has built up over the years. So again, just wanted to make you aware of this opportunity this evening and wanted to be available in case you had any questions. So.
Is there really any downside to doing this?
We wouldn't put you in a position where you would ever be worse off. In other words, incur a bunch of expense and then we can't capture a savings. So the worst outcome would be that we spend some time exploring this and we just can't get investors to offer their bonds in, and we've wasted some of your administration time exploring this and some of our time, but we wouldn't put you in a position where you would be financially worse off. And then the tough question to answer too is, is capturing this savings and differential now, would you be able to capture more of a savings down the road by waiting for maybe a better market environment, or even waiting till closer when you get to the call date, which would be in about 7 years, and you have the legal ability then to do a refinancing and pay off those bonds. But that's the tough part is this meets a lot of the industry guidelines, if you will, that we look at in terms of level of savings relative to the amount of bonds being refinanced. But those are really the two scenarios where you don't want to incur a cost without that savings benefit. We won't let that happen. And then the tough part is, could you save more down the road? And that's really the impossible question to answer.
Is there a minimum percentage that we'd have to buy back, or?
I think, yes, I would think so. I don't know exactly where you would draw that line.
Nothing by law, though.
Nothing by law. So let's say we only get 1/4 of the investors that are willing to offer their bonds in, then that's going to push the savings to about 100,000. There's some fixed, and that's net of all costs. That's the actual savings to the district. But at some point you ask yourself, well, is the savings so small? Is it really worth it? Or do we just wait and keep an eye on this for maybe a better opportunity down the road? And, I can't speak for you in terms of where you would say the savings has dropped to a level that let's just put this on hold. But if it gets too small and the savings drops to too little, then you might want to just say, let's hold off for now.
That leads me to where I was going with that. Where at some point, the amount of work Raymond James has to do offsets that savings. And where do you create revenue in this for your company? I don't see that in the numbers you've given us.
Yeah, and there's some schedules towards the back that show what this new series of bonds would look like. And so our role would be, or where we get compensated is you would be selling a new series of bonds to a new group of investors, and we get paid what's called an underwriting discount or a fee to go out and sell those bonds to investors. So you would have our role, Gilmore and Bell, is your law firm or bond counsel, a rating agency, and there's some other costs. Those costs are paid out of the proceeds of that new bond issue. And that's where the compensation to us or the benefit to us comes from.
Right.
But the savings numbers we're showing you are after factoring in all of those costs.
Okay.
It's on page 14. It's $81,000.
Thank you.
I just want to make, that's correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, 81,000. And then you want to look at those two line items, other cost of issuance and underwriter's discount. Those are really the two categories of costs. So there's about, in this analysis, about 150,000 of financing related expenses for that new bond issue. But that 399,000 in savings is net of all of those costs. So one way to think of it is it's say 550,000 in gross savings, but then you take out the cost of issuance, then it's a net savings to the district of around 400,000.
What do you need from us this evening?
I guess the only information we would need, and we don't even need it this evening if you prefer to think about this, but if you get to a point where you're ready to consider the authorizing resolution from the board perspective, then we would have Gilmore and Bell draft that and have that added to one of your future agendas. So think about it. If and when you get to the point that you want to explore this, then the first step from the board perspective would be to adopt an authorizing resolution, and that allows us then to go out and officially contact the investors.
Is there a time criticalness to this?
Not as much as you might think. On a lot of the bond refinancings, you're dealing with daily changes in interest rates. And really what we're dealing here is not necessarily a change in interest rate, but it's that differential between the taxable bonds we would be buying in and the new tax exempt bonds we would be selling. So I don't think it's as time sensitive as some refinancings, just because we're not dealing with, we're more concerned about that differential than the actual interest rates.
Always seems like a good idea to check into how you can save money, right? I mean, for the district.
Yeah, and I failed to mention, but I might also add that the first step is the authorizing resolution. And then if we are able to lock in a savings, then we bring that savings back to the board in the form of a second step, which is called a bond resolution. And that bond resolution is the more binding document. It locks in the savings, the new interest rates, and the board would have a decision at that point in time as well, that if you change your mind or you just simply, the savings isn't acceptable, then you wouldn't act on, or you wouldn't approve that resolution. So the first step is really giving us permission to explore it. Then we bring back to you for that second step. And you have an opportunity at that point to say whether it's acceptable or not.
Thoughts? We could add it to our next agenda. To have a discussion on.
Savings isn't huge, but getting that tax exempt status seems like an important thing to me.
You have any thoughts, Doug?
Well, 400,000 is nothing to sneeze at. Right now in the bond and interest fund, 1 mil generates right at 400,000. So, if we could take it all in 1 year, it would be a 1 mil saving. Obviously it's going to be spread over multiple years. So, 10 million's not, we owe a lot more than that. So 10 million is really small compared to overall debt. I thought it was worth looking at. Nothing to hurry and jump and pass it tonight and let's go, but something I think warrants a serious look.
Hey Doug, I have a question. This might be the weirdest one you've got this year. So if you treated this like a house payment divided by 12, what would our bond payment be a month? Is that just a crazy thing to ask?
Oh. Well, we're paying out, I want to say, Greg might know this number off his top of his head, about 13 million a year in bond and interest payments. So about $1 million a month.
Okay. Yeah, it's a half of a payment. Well, not quite a half, but yeah.
Yeah. If you want to look at it that way, yeah.
That's a number that makes sense to a lot of people that way. So.
Let's add this to it as an agenda item for our next meeting, is for an authorizing resolution on checking into potential bond refinance.
We will do that.
All right, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Moving on to discussion item 9.02 is USD230 Spring Hill Recreation Commission Representative, Dr. Luttrell.
Want to do that one, or do we want to go through the student devices first?
Oh, sorry about that. Guess the agenda changed on me, didn't it? Moving on, 9.02 is purchase of student mobile devices for instructional use starting in 23-24 school year.
Yeah, the thing that, like I said, as we start talking about this item here, and again, it's just for information, we would bring it back as an action item at our next meeting. This has totally separate from the desktops that we just talked about. This here is actually the mobile devices that are placed in the hands of our students and our staff. We've been using the MacBook for several years. And of course, we're on a deployment plan with those, and we are nearing the end of that 4-year deployment plan. And so the IT department led by Mr. Elliott, Dr. Smith, our instructional coaches and others have been since the start of the school year and even a little bit prior, researching, what, as we get ready for that, decision on what type of device, do we stay with what we have or do we transition to a different one? What are our options and how do we go about making sure that we make a solid decision with that? And so Mr. Elliott and his committee and Dr. Smith have really put a lot of effort into it. They made some road trips to some other districts, outside the state of Kansas even. And they have come up with a recommendation that would transition majority of our secondary devices from the MacBooks into the iPad, which the iPad has come a long way over the years. And so anyway, I'm going to let Mr. Elliott and then Dr. Smith is here as well if he needs any reinforcement. There are questions, but I thought Mr. Elliott did a great job of summarizing in the packet there about some of the processes that were utilized in this recommendation. With us tonight also, which I'm sure Mr. Elliott will cover after the meeting, if you want to look down, that we have out on one of the tables as you come in this evening against the wall there are a couple of the two main devices that would be the focus of what we would transition to. A big thing that goes into this decision, of course, that while it's felt that this device here that they'll be looking at is definitely going to meet all the needs that we currently have with our current devices that our students need, but also, again, Mr. Elliott has used his prowess, Mr. Schrin's rubbed up on him and knows about making a good deal. And we are able, the devices that are being recommended here that might transition away from the MacBook are a device that would save the district I want to say considerable, but quite a bit of money compared to what we've been on our current model with the MacBook for a variety of reasons. So, Mr. Elliott, I'll turn over to you for a couple minutes. Again, he is unable to be with us tonight, but he is here via Zoom. So, Mr. Elliott, anything you want to add to this discussion?
Yeah, so thank you very much for that, Dr. Luttrell. I think you've covered most everything. The only thing I might just add, one of the things I was going into this kind of focusing on is how do we move what we've been doing forward? And, we made a lot of strides. We're finishing up our 8th year. It's about 8.5 actually, by the time you consider the way we started the initial rollout. But finishing up the 8th year on this project of going 1-to-1 in our secondary schools. And I think the iPad gives us that next transition. And by that, I mean, as Dr. Luttrell mentioned, and the chart that Brent referenced earlier, I do need to give a shout out to Christopher and his team for helping put that together, because that was a very nice, concise document to share with staff. But I think that the next step in this process is to not only do what we've done, but fill in some holes and allow us to do some things that maybe we haven't done. And some of that is not about the device, but it's about the additional tools that we can take advantage of. So as Dr. Smith and her team, works hard to find good curricular support resources, we need to make sure that our devices in the technology department are supporting those. And so some of this is purchasing the device. Some of this is hopefully rearranging funds to make better use of additional curricular support resources that are available. So I'll be happy to stand for any questions. I think I tried to cover everything in here. And as Dr. Trell mentioned, the student and teacher iPad Pro is against the wall. Obviously, you guys know what the MacBook is, so I didn't set up a demo of that. So
I guess I would have a little bit of concern that the screen size is quite a bit smaller and the as well as the keyboard. How well are the students going to be able to write papers and type into those things? I mean, I can see using the touch screen portion of it for things, but it doesn't seem like it's as usable for typing.
And that would be a great one. It's one of the reasons I wanted to make sure and have one of those there. If you look at that keyboard, it is really not very different than the MacBooks that they're using now. If you look at the MacBook, you basically have an inch on each side from the keyboard to the edge, and you just don't have that on that keyboard. So it is very comparable. I actually been using one, trying to make it a primary use device for that very reason, Nels, because I wanted to make sure that it was something that I could function on. And the size of the screen, it is a little bit smaller, but because of the Zoom capabilities, because of the apps are built for it, it's really not something that at least in our feedback so far has become a concern.
Did the students have any input on that, or have we used?
Yeah, we are actually. So the buildings are doing demos with their instructional staff, and then we have scheduled with this superintendent advisory, the student advisory group, we'll be getting some input from them.
I was just thinking back to the, the original decision that I think was at a December 4:30 meeting back 8 years ago or 9 years ago or whatever, and how much things have really changed, because our oldest daughter was a senior that year. And then from her to our youngest son, how much more kids are using their phones and using the touch screens, and things really have changed a lot in how these devices work. And I think we had even thought then maybe to do iPads for 8th grade, 7th and 8th grade, or the middle school. And we ended up going with the MacBooks because of the keyboard and everything. But I'm looking at the device over there, and the screen doesn't even look that much smaller, and the keyboard isn't that much smaller either. So I can see where this would be a good idea, especially if it's a cost saving thing too.
Well, I do want to highlight, I did put it in the item, but we've had the discussion at several meetings about parents and their checkbook and that kind of thing. One of the things that Apple's offering with this particular bundle that we're looking at is a 3-year accidental damage warranty, which covers 2 damages per year per device at 100%. And basically with that, now Doug and I haven't finished crunching numbers yet, but one of the things we're considering is that we would remove that $20 tech fee that we put in place when we added the MacBooks, because we believe that this accidental damage will reduce our out-of-pocket expense for repairs so dramatically. And in addition, the percentages, the 20, the 50, and the 80%, as you recall, that we assign to parents for the damages would be gone as well. The only damages that wouldn't be covered are intentional damages or damages that are not considered an accident. If the device is lost, if the device is obviously purposefully had something shoved through the center of it, those kinds of things.
Bill, I know you're not here, but there's 2 devices sitting over on the table. There's one that's bigger. Is that the teacher version? Or
That's
is that
the iPad
student?
Pro. Yes, that's the iPad Pro, and it's more of a workhorse kind of a device. If the teacher would choose that would be the device they get. Otherwise, they could continue to use a MacBook and then the student iPad. There's several things that they're going to need an iPad to do, including the classroom management applications and so forth. So that's the reason they still will need an iPad. But from a cost standpoint, they're very similar between the MacBook and its regular iPad and the iPad Pro.
They're bringing it up for all of us to see. So I currently use the what is this called? Surface, Microsoft, the non-Apple version of these. And I actually have both sizes, and I do like the bigger one better because it's easier to see, and it is a compressed keyboard and all of that. But I'm interested to see how this one compares just size wise. It is hard to do any sort of work on this. Is it an 8-inch?
But I think they're 9, but I will have to double check that. Let me go, while you're talking, I'll look it up.
That's okay. And I'll also see it as it comes down and kind of compare it to mine. But it is a little harder to work on. And I actually have a laptop as well that when I'm trying to utilize a keypad or actually type long emails and things like that, I rather use that as well. So I don't know. I see this. I worry a little bit about the stylus and losing those. Are we going to connect them with like a phone cord? How are we going to keep the kids from losing those suckers?
Those are actually going to be classroom sets. It's not something we're going to provide each student. Primarily, we'll be looking at the classes that will have some pretty high utilization for handwriting needs, data collection, potentially in the sciences, writing in the English departments. And then there'll be additional sets in the media center for those one-off activities that a teacher might want to do in class.
And then will you guys present costs, or is this just like as we renew, we switch them out?
Yeah,
the devices get switched out?
Yeah, I'll be presenting costs. I've actually been working on, we're kind of in between fiscal years and calendar years, and there's some things going on in Apple that we're trying to work through. It's possible that we won't ask for approval at the next meeting. It might be the first one in February, depending on some of the quotes that I'm currently working on. I'd hope to have those for you tonight. It just didn't get here yet.
Okay, and just, can you help me understand the difference between the option the teachers might have here and the computers we just approved?
The computers you approved are more like the Windows desktop that Candy's using over there, or that the presentation station has. Those are on the elementary school classroom locations. They're in the elementary school labs. There were a few on there for some secondary labs in preparation for thinking that we're going in this direction. I can always order less later. It's just tough for me to order more after the fact. So, but in specialty labs, our AutoCAD lab at the high school, potentially our computer applications at the middle school level, those kinds of locations is what those Windows machines are for.
Gotcha. So we won't have any that we ordered, and that'll just be sitting around because now we bought new iPads.
Oh gosh, no.
Okay.
Hey, Phil, real quick. Do you have an idea how many iPads we have out there running right now? And I'm curious how many of them have keyboards.
I'll get you the number on how many. Quick side note, they're 10.2-inch screens, by the way, on those, the regular iPad. The ones that are running keyboards, we have almost none, with the exception of a couple in some unique special education locations, and a few administrators have purchased some on their own, and maybe some teachers have too, but the administrators are the only ones I'm aware of.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions from Mr. Elliott?
Brent, there's about 1,000 iPads out there right now, primarily in our kindergarten and first grade classrooms, and then teachers have them available.
Okay, thanks. Because yeah, I knew we had that's a lot of it. We know what we're getting with that. So,
well, and I would add to that statement, Brent, that it's actually one of the big recommendations. The management of the iPad the quality and reliability of them has been something, especially as we look at staffing challenges, that the MacBook has become a pretty big maintenance challenge, both from the screen. The latest series of MacBooks has had a real screen challenge with, you can look at them wrong and they break. And we're also just finishing up our 4th year, and we're averaging about 5 batteries a week that are failing in our fleet. And so it's a concern. It's also one of the reasons that I'm looking at this particular proposal as a 3-year plan instead of a 4-year. The charge cycles that our students get on devices is just more than the average device because of how they use it, both at school and at home.
Bill, could you just talk through a little bit of, because it seemed like at one point you had mentioned maybe looking at Chromebooks and why you are staying with the Mac devices?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. And it is, there are a host of reasons, but the very simple thing is just the functionality difference. About 4 years ago, I got the opportunity to go out to Apple's headquarters in Cupertino with a group of about 15 or 20 other technology directors from the Kansas City area. And we got a unique opportunity to sit in a conference room with the heads of the Mac division and the iPad division and the accessories division and so forth. And it was kind of a roundtable discussion. And what was very interesting is that we told Apple that what we desperately needed was an iPad with a keyboard. And they said, well, you can get all the Bluetooth ones. And I said, you don't understand. I can't deal with 25 Bluetooth keyboards in every classroom that are going to crosstalk and try to pair those and keep track of them. And so they kind of laughed it off and they said, well, our choice is an iPad or a MacBook. And that was it. And at the time, those of us that were there came back and we had a very great discussion on, back at the hotel and on the plane ride back, that while the Chromebook has a lot of functionality and can be a really good device in the right situation, there are so many more applications, there are so many more available tools for the iPad, especially in the education sector, that it really kind of rises to the top. Now, I would say if you look at that attachment with this agenda item, and you look at the number of hours that they spend on Chrome, it would be a pretty easy decision to make that be the tool of choice. The problem you get into is it's the unique and the one-off projects that happen throughout the year where you lose that flexibility. So the iPad does such a phenomenal job with video editing and video capture. There are a lot more graphic and content creation tools for the iPad than there is for the Chromebook. While I think the Chromebook is a very viable option in a lot of cases, I think to maintain what we've started and as a district to try to be a little bit of a leader in this area, I think the iPad is a better choice for very similar dollars. I would also share that there are, as Dr. Luttrell mentioned, I got the opportunity to go look at some other districts that have been doing this for a few years. Some of them transitioned from MacBooks to iPads. Some of them just started with the iPad. But I got an opportunity to go with several other Kansas districts on that trip as well. And so I think you're going to see a little bit more of this kind of being the trend because of the reliability of the device, the price point of the device, and the functionality and flexibility in the tools that are available.
Thanks.
Yep.
So I'm wondering, I know that you are, as you just talked about, in fact, my notes say connected to other districts. So I know that you do talk to people across the district lines. And so when my oldest 7 or 8 years ago was starting middle school, 6th grade, that's when Olathe that year transitioned. We were in the Olathe district at the time, transitioned to iPads. And so they've definitely had a lot of experience with iPads for at least 7 to 8 years. I'm wondering what your feedback has been, that it did not go very well when in middle school then, because they couldn't type, they couldn't work on papers. And that was the biggest complaint, is that they couldn't work, they couldn't put together projects, they couldn't work on papers. And they did have keyboards. Then it was just like exactly like this one that was here. I do think though that the keyboard might have been Bluetooth. I think you're right, but it was in like a hard case. It was like a clam case and so it was attached like this, but I wonder how much their IT department did deal with the Bluetooth part, but we never had those issues. The bigger issue is trying to write papers and be effective on those. So what, have you talked with Olathe to see what their feedback has been?
Yeah, they, trying to figure out the best way to answer this. They're a very different district than we are.
Well,
And
yes.
they have a different set of challenges and a different set of opportunities. I would say that one of the things I specifically have done, the Holton School District in Kansas made this transition 2 years ago. And so I spent quite a bit of time with them. The other districts that went with me to Omaha area to look at several districts there are similar size to slightly larger than us. And one of the things that I think the takeaway from me in going to some of those districts is everybody was anxious to start, but because of the device, because of the functionality and flexibility of the tools that go with the device, and because, as I've indicated in this agenda item, one of the things we will definitely do is in a classroom where they still need the full-blown Mac operating system or the Windows operating system, by making this choice, we'll have the flexibility of giving our students the opportunity to use the best tool for what they're trying to do. So the feedback from Olathe is while it's valuable, doesn't necessarily apply in our scenario.
So I think I understand their districts are very different, but just from a very basic level, like how was it to write papers? How was it to instruct students to write papers like that? Not necessarily what they could afford or what we could afford or the differences in our district, but I think that information from them and even our personal experience, it was kind of frustrating. I'm glad to see that you know, it's in the agenda too, that we are going to get feedback from some of the instructional coaches and through Google Forms. And I'm hoping that we can hear, and I mean, we can always reach out to them too, to the English teachers specifically in the high school. Like they're the ones that are going to really.
Yeah, we'll be presenting all of that at one of the future agenda items, all of that feedback as well. So.
Okay. Yeah. I'm just hoping that it's people that really work specifically with writing papers and what.
Every teacher, the instructional coaches are meeting with the teams of teachers in all areas. So they're getting feedback from all secondary teachers.
Okay. Yeah, I look forward to hearing from them directly as well.
Okay, another thought. We're losing a jump drive or a USB port. So the classes that require jump drives for them, and I don't know what they are, but I know I buy them for my kids on the school list. Will they have another avenue of saving or whatever they do with those? Or is there something else we use a USB for?
Off the top of my head, I'm not sure which classes are requiring that. So that would be a little bit of research I'd need to do on my side. But with Google Drive, we will also have access to the iCloud with a school license for that. So they'll have 2 cloud storage solutions. One of the things we're actually going to do, and one of the goals of this, is to reduce the downtime for students. And so their device will be designed to sync automatically, so that if something would happen to the device, they would just log into a new one and all the data would be restored.
Any other questions for Mr. Elliott?
Thanks for all your work looking into better options, I guess.
Yeah, alternatives.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Moving on to Discussion item 9.03 is USD 230 Spring Hill Recreation Commission Representative. Dr. Luttrell?
Yes, as you all are well aware, the Spring Hill Rec Board is basically somewhat of an ancillary group extension of the school district. The mill for that is generated through USD 230, but they're still kind of their independent body, but yet, we have a good relationship with them. They have a board of directors, and the board of directors, several are appointed from the city, several are appointed by the district. And so we listed for you there who the current board members are, who they were appointed from. And then we currently, though, have an opening, and this is the first opening we've had since I've been here in my short tenure. And so Mr. Peel and I have been working closely since July, and we thought this would be a good time since we have an opening, to kind of have him share just a little bit about what's been done previously when an opening has come, what the process has been to go about filling that. And so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Peel and let him briefly kind of give an update and what he would like to foresee about in terms of the time frame and how to go about putting the process in place to fill this open position on the Spring Hill Rec Board. Mr. Peel, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Dr. Luttrell and school board members. So in the packet that is in your agenda there's basically three different things, some information, just kind of a rundown of kind of some of my thoughts on how the process works or what processes you could potentially use. There's a couple of options to look at. The main thing out of that first piece, I think, is that there's really no correct or incorrect way to do this. It's not statutorily mandated to be done in any certain process or procedure. So it's really up to the will of the board, what you decide you want to do. There's, as Dr. Luttrell said, some information on our current members, and also some information about the vacancy spot. There's also a packet in there that KRPA has put out, which is Kansas Recreation and Parks Association, which answers a lot of questions about recreation commissions, how they're formed, what they can and can't do. I was trying to give you answer as many questions as I could in advance, and there's a lot of information in there. So really, I think the biggest thing to highlight is what kind of person we're looking for. We're really looking for someone who is an engaged member of our community, is willing to spend a little bit of time to weigh in on and decide on some very important issues that are out there. It's actually a rec commission board member position is very similar to a school board member position, with the difference being that it's not elected. But it's an unpaid position. There's a fair amount of time commitment, and there's some weighty, important decisions that go into it as well. I also like to think of our organization is the fun people. So a lot of our decisions are about fun stuff and exciting topics, and we're doing a lot of really great things for our community, and we're really excited about a lot of them. So it's not, just a bunch of humdum, boring stuff. We talk about fun stuff a lot. So ideally, this is a person who is social, who engages with a lot of members of our community, who can take feedback from a lot of different areas, and who also has a lot of energy to talk to a lot of people. Those are some of the most ideal characteristics that we're looking for. The number one issue is meeting attendance. We do only have 5 members on our board, which means currently we have a vacancy, which means we can only have 1 person missing for a board in order to maintain a quorum. 3 is our quorum. So that's why attendance is always important. And that's actually why Mr. Troop resigned. He had a shift in his wife's work responsibilities, and his time was not going to be available anymore. So he was a great board member, by the way. So we were sad to see him go. Specific to this position is kind of a geography issue as well. We really want to try and target a person who lives in the northern part of the district. And the reason for that is that out of our 5 positions, 2 are appointed by city, 2 are appointed by school district, and 1 is an at-large. Our at-large person currently lives in city limits just by chance, and that's the way we sit right now. The 2 city limit positions normally are required to be, or not required, but normally are selected from people living in the city limits. And also by chance, our other school board appointee also lives in city limits. So 4 of our 5 positions are city limit people. When we went through this process with Mr. Troop, we specifically targeted that area, the northern part of the district as well, because we do have a little bit of a gap that we're trying to bridge with there. Not necessarily a bad gap or anything like that, but we struggle to get participation, particularly in our non-sports activities from people from the northern part of the district. And I don't think it's anything that we're doing wrong or that those people are missing or anything like that. The main issues that are there is the competition up there is much, much more prevalent. Johnson County Parks and Rec is right next door to some of our people, literally right next door. Also Olathe Parks and Rec, and there's just so many more options right there in that northern area. And then the other phenomenon we've seen is outside of sports, we struggle to get people to travel south for activities, particularly our special events or non-pay-to-play style of activities. We do get lots of sports teams that come from Timber Sage and Prairie Creek. And I would anticipate a lot of our middle school participants, which is usually 6th grade for athletics, come from both of our middle schools, and will continue to come from all 3 of them when the 3rd one's online next year. But that's just the pattern that we've noticed. And so one of the first steps that we're trying to do to reach out to that is, hey, let's get a board member up there that represents us, somebody that talks to a lot of people in the neighborhoods and who can spread the word about what we do. Because they do pay for our services, whether they want to or not. So it's there for them. Their tax money is going to that, whether they participate or not. So, so there's mainly 2 big options that have been done in the past. There is the open enrollment or open application, which is pretty much treated like a job application. Put it out there online on your website, people fill it out, you get applications in, and you screen them, maybe interview 3 or 4 of them and figure out who you want to do. The other, that's been done by the city in the past. So for when we used, Mr. Troop was appointed, we went through the other option, which was more of a recruitment style option. Everybody here has connections with people in the community. I'm sure all of you have 3 or 4 names in your head at this point that you think may or may not be able to fit this role pretty well, depending on circumstances. There's good and bad with both ways of doing that. I think the biggest pro with the recruitment option is you can fill a position pretty quickly, and usually between this group of people, you're going to have a lot of good candidates, people that you know. The downside is there might be somebody out there that you don't know that could hit that application process. The thing that would always scare me about the application process is sometimes you end up having to recruit people to the application process. So if you go straight application, you may not get a lot of applications. It is a volunteer job. It does take time away from family and all those types of things. So there's pros and cons to however you like to do it. And you can adjust this to fit what you want it to be, or you could use a totally different option than what I'm presenting. So we'll go back to it really is the will of what you guys want to do. But we did the appointment process, or excuse me, the recruitment process with Mr. True. The city in the past has always done the open applications. So, and those are the 2 main ones that you see from recreation commissions across the state, more or less. They use some version of that. from what you would need or want from us or from our organization, we can participate however you might like to or would ask us to. We could be an advisory role. We could participate in interviews if you wanted us to do that. We could do absolutely nothing and you guys can 100% handle it how you want to. Or you could say, hey, we would like you to do the process and bring us a candidate that fits well and give us a recommendation. So we're here to help you or assist you however you would like our assistance. And that's and more or less provide information however you would feel it needed or necessary. So timeline wise, the hope is to have this filled towards the end of February. And as I was looking at the calendar there, you could actually go as far as your first meeting in March and still be able to hit our first March meeting, which has been my goal. And that's actually 8 weeks from tonight. So you've got a solid 2 months of timeline there that you can work with. And I think there's 5 meetings in there. One of them's a work session, so this probably wouldn't come up for that, but there's actually more time than I thought there was. I thought it was more like a month and a half. So I'll stand for any questions that you might have or help you out however you need.
I think the easiest people to get to join the board are folks that have students in the programs. I mean, that's seems like if we had a little help on advertising to the right people, it might help get the.
Yeah, I don't really see any downfall with doing the open, at least having it open for a while. I think the recruitment thing has happened in the past because you do the open. I mean, we've had people come before us before, but sometimes you don't get any applicants. So then you go to the recruitment phase, kind of like some other boards and things. So I don't see any downfall to starting some communication on our end and on your end that there's an open position. Let's at least let people know, and you might have some really good people step forward that want to put their name in the ring for it.
So
4-year term, and this is 3.5 years of.
Yeah, so this one actually, I think Mr. Troop was a little over a year in-ish. So there's, let's see, term end in June of 26 it would be to serve the rest of the existing term, which is a pretty significant piece of it. Our bylaws state that generally 2 full terms is what we look to see from board members served. There is the ability of the board to adjust that, but we try to keep them moving in and out so that there's fresh ideas and fresh perspectives. So yes, this would be term end of June 26.
Brian and I've been communicating a little bit about it, and I've been putting the word out, and I've gotten a lot of no's and some yeses, but I think we're at a standstill of what do we do next and how the board wants to proceed. Do we want, whichever way we want to go. So everyone asks, what's the next step? And I don't know. I'll let you know.
Next step was tonight, more or less.
Yes.
I know Mr. Peel and I have, talked several times, and I think again, that everyone wants, we want the best person. We want to make sure that we turn over as many stones as we can. And I think that maybe if we look at, if it's okay with the board, if we look at maybe using kind of blending the two, the recruitment as well as the application process, we can work with, like I said, our own internal communications department. We can put some things on our website that kind of post it. I can mention it as well in my notes that go out to kind of maybe direct the contact to Mr. Peel. And then maybe as he receives those and sorts through them, since he's been his area of expertise, and he kind of knows what we're looking for. If maybe he can then maybe filter that down to maybe 1 or 2, if there's that many that he thinks really, really good, that maybe he can bring back a recommendation to us.
So my only concern with Brian, it's, all respect to you, but it's kind of like the superintendent thing. This is our job. I find it a control issue for Brian to place someone on his board and recommend somebody. So I really do think that we should review the applications and place somebody. That's my thought.
I was just thinking they could help advertise to the right people because they have all the names of the program. And
Oh, yes, absolutely.
know who might be up in the areas you're targeting and.
Yeah, and I that's kind of where I see as an advisory role. If an applicant came in and had questions about what the role is or time commitment, stuff like that, we can absolutely answer those. We can definitely help market it. We can do all those types of things. And I would tend to agree with you that the process that we used in the past was more involved for us and less involved for this group. And I think personally, I think the role should be switched a little bit. So.
Yeah, I do think it makes sense for the district to house the application process and then, go from there. See how many people apply, and then if we have to have some kind of big way to determine, we can, I guess, go from there. It's exciting to think there might be a whole bunch of people interested.
Yeah. And if you wanted us to be involved in the interview process or the review process, or myself or one of our board members or any of that's where we're willing to step in and fill any request that you have of us. So.
That would be a wise idea, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So what direction do you need, Dr. Luttrell?
I think it's pretty evident we want to start posting it, kind of putting the word out from the district end here and kind of maybe just like we put any other vacancy, so to speak, with a deadline. And then, like I said, I can work once we get some in and I still think Mr. Peel should, he can assist us in kind of looking through them, and then we can bring, like I said, we can bring the applicants to you and say, hey, this is how many we had. You all can see them all. But, here again, as we've looked at it, I still think that, again, myself, we should, like anything else, give a recommendation and say why. But then again, you all have full say to see every application, and you wouldn't want to go with the direction that's put out there. That'd be great. If you felt there was another individual, you would see that and we could go with that. I don't believe we want to make it very complicated, because like I said, we do want to get good people, and I think good people will come forward with this. But I think we can definitely meet Mr. Peel's timeline if we get on that here. Like I said, I think by the end of the week or first next week, we can definitely have some information out from our portion in terms of posting on our websites and social media to get the word out to our.
And as soon as you share that with us, we can put it on our regular marketing schedule to circulate as well through our socials and website and all that.
Just the kind of the trend, I think, and the most important thing with boards right now, I think all kinds of boards, is attendance. Because it puts so much pressure on the other people on the boards when you have somebody that doesn't attend meetings, because then they have to. So to get your quorums, and every board that I have interaction with right now is struggling to get people to be present. So.
Yeah, we've actually experienced that a little bit in the past as well. In a situation when we had our at-large position that was vacant, and which is the rec board's responsibility to fill, and we weren't real enthusiastic about getting that done quickly. And we quickly found that it was becoming difficult to make sure that we could have a quorum and have people there. So that was also one of the reasons in trying to establish a pretty tight timeline of getting somebody in there, so that it really is unfair to the other board members to say, hey, I really need to have you there because so-and-so and so-and-so are not. So.
Can you remind me what the time ask is of, like, do you meet twice a month, once a month, and usually the length of your meetings?
So we meet once a month on the second Wednesday. It's at 6 p.m. and it's at the Civic Center, and generally try to keep it to 2 hours or less. I'd probably give that a plus or minus 30 minutes, depending on what the agenda looks like. So time commitment is not horrible, I would say, but it is important stuff. It's hard to balance those two things.
Any other questions? Give the guidance you need?
Yes,
to move
definitely.
Forward, I think
Sure do.
the communications start to them. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Peel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Moving on to discussion item 9.04 is board members whose term expire in 2024.
Speaking of boards and the Board of Education, this is 2023. There will be a board election in the fall. And just remind everybody, there are 4 positions that are up from one from each of the 3 areas, as well as an at-large position. That deadline will close around June 1st with the election in November, and candidates file at either depending on where they live, Johnson County. I mean, we'll use the Johnson County Election Office for filing regardless of what portion of our school district county-wise that they may live in. We've got information there, but we will be, said Mrs. Kramer, be, having that information on our website and so forth. So we'll be heading into that, and we'll see come June 1st what the candidate said it filed will look like heading into the fall election. Just want to kind of let everybody give an update on that.
I think one of the reasons we asked to have this on the agenda is to make sure that people are aware of that June 1st filing date. Sometimes people don't understand that it's that early to file for a position. I think also you have to live in if you're in area 1, you have to live in area 1. If you're running for area 2, you have to live in area 2, area 3. The at-large position is the only position that you don't actually have to live in that area. You can be anywhere in the district. So I think we've gone both sides of the district or all sides of the district at large positions. So any other comment?
I think this is this cycle, I mean, a quorum of the board could turn over. So that makes me a little nervous, being the person that's gonna, one of the people that's stay here. So, just, it's a big decision. It's a big commitment. It's important. It's important work.
Yes, it does matter.
It matters.
Any other comments? All right, moving on to items on the horizon, Dr. Luttrell.
I just wanted to, on the horizon list, like I said, for some odd reason, I spent all the time last semester getting everything together to make sure I was much more in tune with what we need to have every meeting on the agenda topics. First semester helped me do that. I sat down with members of our team last week, the first day back. We kind of plugged items in, had that all ready to go. For some reason, it would not upload that whole redone, but I did put out at the desk out there, and everybody that wants to look at it. Then I also brought around earlier before the meeting and just kind of show you that I did do the work. That kind of a little sheet that kind of says right now will remain very fluid, but does give some of the main topics that we will be working on or having some information on between now and June. And thing to remember is that's a very fluid list. Not every item is on there, but try to put in there a lot of the annual things or the big items that I know coming up on the horizon that we're going to have at various times throughout this semester. So that's just kind of going to be busy. But like I said, it's all good. Nothing earth shattering. And like I said, we do have the coming up, we've got the real world learning presentation from the Kaufman Foundation that we've been working on the last year, that we get to the point we got to make a presentation and try to get some grant funds and start really getting into it and making an impact on site with that. We'll be bringing that information to you sometime in February. Of course, we have teacher, administrator annual reviews. We have, as we said, this is our final year, even though Apple Bus was sold last year. The contract we had with Apple stayed in place with the new vendor. This school year is the conclusion of that contract, so we will have to approve a new transportation contract, and that's where I've said I think this is an excellent opportunity to at least look at is tiered busing, not blackout busing where we're going to not bus people one day a week, but look at tiered busing possibly, or keep it the way it is. There would be some savings, of course, in a tiered system. But I thought we would maybe instead of locking into one, when we bring a contract proposal in, show both models. And you can just we can look yourself, get the ins and outs. But then also in the meantime, like I said, between now and the next month, I also hope to, like I said, get some information out, engage some interest, or basically try to educate some of our patrons about some of the challenges we do have with our busing in terms of drivers, even though it's not our service, it's an extension of us, and making sure that they realize, just some of the benefits and reasons why if we were to go to a tiered busing system, what that might look like, as well as, what would be some of the pros and long-term benefits, as well as, some other side things that could be arisen from that. But again, thought instead of just focusing on one, we keep both options open. And when we bring up a contract proposal, come forward with two different models, one or where we are, and one if we want them, we'll both likely make a switch. And then some of the other, like, we're looking at our professional learning community model, which again, I've told you many times, I'm a firm believer in that. We're fortunate that we have that in place. I think it needs to be tweaked. I think that came up on the Listen and Learn tour. We did put the survey out, which again, y'all are going to get, and I bet we plugged in here. I believe it is in one of the February meetings where we'll be coming with you, members of our committees and teachers, staff that have led by Dr. Smith, Dr. Robinson, that have gone through those results, convening some other individual stakeholders together to kind of determine if there's going to be some recommendations on some tweaks. We might want to consider doing that for our next school year, and would bring those for discussion. At that time, we have again some security things we might be looking at. I know at some point you all will be asking about staffing and how we're doing with recruitment, retention. As you saw on the personnel list tonight, we are going to lose some teachers that have a lot of longevity, or administrators as well. And so we want to make sure that we've got good processes in place to make sure that we continue to attract high quality individuals. We also will have a calendar draft at some point. We try to stay on a 2-year calendar, district calendar format. One thing I'm hoping to do this year is and actually convene a group of staff together. And I think it's been a few years since we've actually gone in and looked at, hey, what are some things within the calendar that we might want to try to do differently, instead of just saying, okay, these are the standard days we always have, we've always done it. There might be some different ways to do that. So that we do that, we'll bring those to you. So you can kind of study that, but as you said earlier, it's going to be busy. Later on in the spring, we'll have again the handbooks. We'll have it by the end of the year in May. Again, we'll bring you our annual end of the year strategic plan update, which after the Listen and Learn tour, we're looking at, again, keeping the content all the same, because it's very good with this focus on individualized, personalized learning, as well as focus on mental health, as well as student growth. We're looking at trying to right now to tie it in a little bit more as the format structure, in terms of making sure that we have categories and subcategories that touch every group across the district, that's able to know what their role in that is when it comes to the 4 main processes, again, that I think is important in school improvement and continuous improvement is where have we been, where are we now, where do we want to be, and then how are we going to get there? And when we put this into place, again, which was last year, now that we've gone through our 5-year accreditation, any restructuring we do, we come back next year in our year 1 of our new KISA cycle, that'll basically have our strategic plan, everything rolled over into a truly what should be a 5-year plan. So we're excited about that. So that's on the agenda. But anyway, I was kind of glad I just could not get it to upload today. And so that's the horizon list. And I can go, if you want, don't mind, I can roll right in real quickly to the superintendent's report.
Yeah, let's roll.
The legislative session is about up and rolling in the state of Kansas. As always, we'll follow closely the proposed legislation, especially those that has potential to impact public ed. Still, Doug and I are still working hard on trying to draw attention to the fact that, we're a year behind growing districts on funding, and we're hopeful. So we've been had good reception from, Representative Thomas and a few others, especially to help us with that. Of course, the process is a slow grind, and so we have to stay up for that. We're just hoping for a win-win remedy on that. I know it later in this session, we'll also have a time where we'll work with the city and then try to go up and lobby and meet with our legislators and try to give them our thoughts on a variety of topics. The weather, even though it's still early, is cooperated in terms of not having any cancellations yet. Although a lot of time remains, but again, right now, pretty optimistic in the long-term 10-day forecast looks pretty good. So we're always pleased with that. And then the next session of the board will be held on Monday, the 23rd. That will be a session, though we will be in the AM because that will be held at Wood Creek Elementary School. And I've got 7 p.m., but it's actually AM, so don't sleep in that morning. That's all I have. President Updike.
I have one thing. Spring Hill on the Move. Did I get the name right? Okay. Last year, we kind of talked about it. Our district does it. All the departments have teams and the board I think we maybe got involved a little late, but today's day one, guys, and we could be a real team this year. Sharon came up with our name.
The board walks.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that. the boardwalk.
Be associated with that.
So if there's anyone that would like to be a team together, Christopher and all the people in the district will send us some information and tell us how we can participate.
So they'll send us some.
You gonna send it to everyone or just?
I think it's activity minutes or steps, and you get points, and then they put it out, and we could really kill it, guys. We could be the winners.
You all could get a volleyball team too. Play on the volleyball.
There you go.
All right, very good. So you'll send, I guess, the on the move stuff.
Sounds good.
Nicole's our team leader.
Nicole's
go, Coach.
coming in. Very good. Thank you very much. We are adjourned. What was that?
Plan discussion.
Yeah.